Other item I wanted to bring up was I wanted to just bring to everybody's attention. I know others have seen this on their own, but Marco Island has been rated the safest city in all of Florida, and that was compiled by SafeWise. And so, Marco Island has always been at or near the top 5, top 3, I think pretty much every single year for at least the past 8 years that I can recall. But to be number 1 by this organization is really great for the island, and I think just something that we all already know and feel, because we live here and we know what our island's like. We know what our, the job that our police department does. By the way, that police department union contract was approved unanimously on consent. So thanks to them for their work in doing that, and everybody else who's just a member, a citizen of this city. Everything we do as a whole contributes to that factor, and it's just wonderful for the island to be recognized in that way. Couple other things really quick. So we had that TDC, or the presentation from Jay Tusa and Sandra Rios regarding the tourism and everything in the county. And Jay's the new tourism director. He came aboard within the past few months. But one thing that they handed out, we didn't really talk about this directly, but one of the visitor demographics that they put in here, primary reasons for travel. Visiting family and friends, and the travel parties that are visiting are couples and families. So these are the people that are coming to Collier County. They're the ones coming to Marco Island, and I mean, you've got, like I mentioned earlier, and they mentioned $2.5 billion in direct spending, 28,000 jobs supported, and $1.25 billion in wages that are directly supported by visitors coming to our area. And there's sometimes a misconception, I guess would be one way of putting it, about who's coming and why. But the reality is that they're couples, they're retirees, they're 40, 45 plus. Coming to visit here, visit the community. They're families that are coming to visit, and that's not just necessarily young families, but multi-generational. Grandparents, parents, grandparents, grandkids, grandparents, parents, kids coming here, and being a part of the island and part of Collier County as a whole. So they're not scary. They're just people, and they really. Without them, this island and this county would be a place where many people would not be able to afford to live, and certainly wouldn't be able to visit. And I think people forget that. The taxes that are collected, again, all 100% tourist tax, only paid by tourists, only people visiting here that are paying that. And you've got $50 million a year, and it goes to things like this sports complex, but to beach renourishment. Anytime that there's a project to renourish the beaches in Collier County, it's paid for by the tourist tax dollars. If there's FEMA reimbursements or whatever that are involved there as well, but it's tourist tax dollars that make that help maintain and keep the beach the way it is. We touched on it a little bit earlier, but the taxes that are collected for Marco Island, anyway, are ad valorem. We're primarily supported, overwhelmingly supported, almost entirely supported by the ad valorem property tax. And 67% of the properties on Marco Island are non-homesteaded properties. So not only does that mean that 2/3 of the island tax dollars are from people who aren't homesteaded here, which are almost exclusively those who don't live here full time. But those people obviously come here during the season, anytime during the year, but not enough for it to be considered their primary residence or enough to homestead their property, their residence somewhere else, whatever the reason is. But 2/3 of the island properties that exist, these people don't live here full time. So we talked about it earlier. If you've got 18,000 people who are full-time population, that only represents a third of the island's population, a third of the island's property owners. And those non-homesteaded property owners pay far more than homesteaded properties do in taxes. So that money that comes in from non-homesteaded property, it supports the homesteaded property owners on the island. Because without those non-homesteaded properties, your taxes are going to go up significantly in order to make up that difference. So that's something that kind of gets lost in the shuffle a lot of times. So you've got, it's just such a significant amount. And some of this data, Gil Polanco and I were going over not too long ago. And when we're talking about, well, how dare someone spend X number of tax dollars on X or on Y? Only the residents can pay for certain. I mean, the reality is that 67% of the properties are non-residents. They're non-homesteaded properties. They're paying far more, a larger percentage than the homesteaded properties are. And so when money is allocated for certain things, those people pay taxes, and they pay a heck of a lot more overall. And furthermore, commercial property on the island is taxed as well. So just because if you're a commercial property owner, you may not have a house on the island, you may have a second house on the island, you may live on the island full time. So you're paying taxes for your homesteaded house, you're paying taxes for your non-homesteaded house, or you're not paying any taxes for residential property whatsoever, but you're also paying commercial property taxes. So those people that others claim don't contribute, they pay taxes as well. Commercial property on the island pays property tax just like residential property does. But they pay it at a higher rate than homesteaded property. So if you look at commercial property on the island, both improved and vacant commercial property on the island pays roughly 4% of all collected 4% of all collected property taxes on Marco Island comes from commercial property. And commercial property, improved and vacant, makes up roughly 1.7% of all the parcels on the island. So our commercial property owners on the island are paying more than their quote-unquote fair share, if we want to look at it that way, if we want to break it down per capita. So 1.7% of the property is paying 4% of the taxes collected. That's commercial property only. And that doesn't account the non-homesteaded residential property, which makes up a massive chunk. So single-family residential, 51% of the collected taxes is from single-family residential. And if you remember, 2/3 of that property is non-homesteaded. So when we talk about where the money's coming from, how it's spent, and why it's spent certain ways, everybody's contributing to this tax base, whether you're a commercial property owner, homesteaded residential, or non-homesteaded residential. And just like Marco Island as a city is a donor into the county, and the county is a donor into the state, and the state is a donor into the federal government, okay, our non-homesteaded properties are donors to our homesteaded properties on the island, because of the amount of money that they put in is substantially higher, and that is used as an offset to improve everybody's taxes, which this council and councils over the last 8 years have gotten to roll back and reduce that rate, property tax rate, by about 40% over the last 8 years. So when we get to the budget approval process and final millage process next month for first reading and second reading, these are, I think, important facts that we need to remember. So whether we're talking about a $200,000 pilot, or we're talking about a multi-million-dollar capital improvement project, or whatever it is, the money doesn't just come from one source, and it comes from primarily, of course, from the property taxes, but it doesn't come from one segment of property owners. It comes from everybody, and some are contributing a lot more their percentage per capita than they would otherwise. So again, just things to remember, and a lot of that information Gil Polanco helped put together. So wanted to thank him. He's not here tonight, but important stuff to remember and consider. I see 2 light signs.